I am so excited to be here, and it's just been, I've been in Serbia this week. I've been working on my Serbian. The only word that I've learned, unlike Danielle, is rakia. So I thought I would start with the cheers. I'm a little nervous. I hate trying to drink in front of people because I'm like, I don't know. But I'm so excited to be here, and we have a really fun topic today. And, I have this belief that, great products have great stories. And while it is amazing to talk about all the technologies and all the things and all that type of stuff, at the end of the day, it's how are we helping one person connect to another. And so what we're going to talk about today is some of what I've taken from, so I also wrote this book, How to Grow and Scale Your Company with Webflow. I would love for everyone, if you don't mind, to stand up, and I'd love to get a selfie with this group, if you have the book with you. So just turn around. Let me get my... I know it's probably somewhere, but... So I wrote this book last year with Webflow, and it's just been the greatest honor. So let's see here. All right, here we go. All right, 1, 2, 3. Hey, 1, 2, 3. Oh, and let me move this piece of paper. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay, awesome. So really fun talk that we're going to have today. But first, before I get started, I just want to say thank you to the Flow Ninja team. Also, I just want to give a shout out to, we actually have an office in Serbia. It's in Belgrade. So for my team in Belgrade, please stand up, give them a round of applause. And I have had so much food and so much to drink, and just I am continually tired, and I have had the best time. And I've also read this guide to the Serbian mentality, and one of the things that I love is there's this deep kind of mix of kindness and intensity. And it's and I was talking with Lemmy on the drive, and they were going back and forth in the back seat. I had no idea what they were talking about, and it was in Serbian, and I was like, hey man, are we okay? It sounds like you guys may be fighting. He was like, no. They were just talking. And so I've just learned so much. And also to Webflow for helping to sponsor the book. And for today, what we're gonna do is we are going to cover all 300 pages in 20 minutes. No, we're not really. But that's what sales feels like, right? So we just have so much that we want to be able to say, so much that we want to be able to talk about, and it's how do we get that out into the world? And I have 2 confessions. One is, I'm making all of this up as I go along. So I have no formal sales training. I studied English and philosophy in school. I don't even have a business degree. And the other part is that I think the sales process kind of sucks. At least the old sales process, and the one that looks like this, where it's we're gonna buy. And that's really not what it's about. And it's not about tricking people. And the theme for today is really simple. And it is selling is helping. And that the idea of building any business is really about how do we build relationships. That's it. Now, all the technology, we can go in and start to look at that, and you niche up, niche down, and it's one of the ways that we build relationships is finding ways to help. Now, I get this question, but I don't work in sales. Who works in sales here? A couple people. Everything is sales. Everything. And it doesn't matter. If you're here today, it is because you sold something, you sold some work, someone sold some work, you were able to work with them. And something my dad had told me is that it doesn't matter what we make, it's what we can sell. And I was like, man, that's kind of shitty. That's tough to think about. But it's true, and I think that there's 2 ways of doing it. You can do it in a way where it feels swarmy and it feels like the Wolf of Wall Street, or you can do something that feels really genuine. And it comes from a place of kindness, maybe a little bit of intensity, and has a point of view. And so the shorthand is what we're going to talk about is I'm going to kind of unpack the sales process that I have made up. And it's based on, it's a lot of stuff, but it's sort of a lived experience. How do we listen to what someone needs? How do we create a plan for what that's going to look like, make it personal, and really create a clear choice for them what they need to do next? And this is kind of the outline for today. I'm going to start with a quick story, a little bit of background around who I am. Then we're going to get into really practically, how do we listen? How do we create plans? How do we make it personal and create that choice? So quick background about me. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, home of Dolly Parton. This is also me. I've always loved sales. This is a little sailboat that I made. I now live in Atlanta, and that's the home of Outkast. Also Coca-Cola, they know how to sell sugar water. And I started in tech with Flash, much like Ryan. I've been at this a while. I've been at this for about 25 years. And my biggest hack was I was able to work in an agency called Avenue A Razorfish, and I was doing Flash development. And what I did was, anyone that had a new business pitch, I raised my hand and I was like, hey, I hate PowerPoint, but I will format that for you. And I did that for 2 years. And it was amazing because it was these people, and they weren't any smarter than I was, but they were out there selling $2, $5, $10 million projects. And I was like, well, I'll clean up those typefaces. And so I just studied those, and I studied what's the rhythm of how they're presenting that work. And fast forward, I was able to start Edgar Allan, which the basic idea is let's build things on the internet with people that we admire and have a great story. We are a story-first company. We try to think about what is the brand story, how do we think about content design, and how do we move into build, and how do we think about optimization. We've delivered about 700 Webflow projects, 43 full-time members, 12 years in business. Webflow as a company is about 13 years old, so we started really early. And we've won Webflow-conf winner about 3 times. You can check out some of our work, letter-run.webflow.io. Really fun, sort of 3JS project. We also built the JavaScript layer for Webflow, so it's called Slater, slater.app. And most recently, we launched our new website, which had the idea of like, what happens when ChatGPT eats the website, right? So it's like, what are the UX patterns gonna look like? How does this start to feel? And we wanted to think about the idea of conversation design. But let's dive into the topic. And so again, these are things that I'm going to be using, I use every single day. And actually one of the audiences here is everyone at Edgar Allan who is here on the laptop. So I'll say hello to them. But you know, the problem with any company is like, how do you scale sales? And really within your career. And so we're going to talk about these 4 main things. And the first one is really around a deep dive of listening and planning. So let's say you've made a connection, someone's asked you for a project, and now the next question is like, how do we go through and create a presentation? So I'm going to take you through my presentation process of what that looks like, and how do we do that in a really practical way. First is start by listening. So listening sounds kind of counterintuitive. You want to get on a phone and you want to be able to tell them all the awesome things, like, right? You want to go and like tell them the 300 pages that are in that book. And the trick is this: avoid telling someone what you do. I know that sounds weird. Instead, ask questions that show that you know how to solve their business problem. And there's a ton of these questions that you can ask, but really the idea is how do you start that conversation? And there's 4 that we'll get into, but I also want to be able to say there's some tools you can start to look at from the outside. So if someone's asking you for a site migration or things along those lines, you actually start doing some pre-research. So 2 quick tools we use for pre-research is we will go through and run a Screaming Frog audit. I will have a sense of how many pages, how many directories, what's on the root, what's the scale, right? How can I have a general understanding of what we need to be able to do? And then from there, I'll start to look at, I'll go with built with. See, these are all free that you can use. Screaming Frog is free till about 500, but built with, you can go and then get a sense of what are the technologies that they're using behind the scenes. So you can at least say like, hey, I see that you're using HubSpot, things along those lines. And the things that we're trying to get at is like, just some general, how many pages, how many directions, all these types of things where we can have an understanding of their current site if we're thinking, I'm kind of thinking about this from a sort of site migration or site redesign or something along those lines before we get on the call. And then we can go through and look at a couple questions to ask. This is the core structure, and then I'm going to show you how to be able to build questions around these. Why does this matter? Why now? Why this way? And why us? And the first one example question here is like, tell me about the goals of this project. And here we want to be able to get to the priorities and expectations. And then getting into the why now, what's going on in the business where this has become a priority. And we want to understand what's the urgency, the timing needs. And then like, how have you approached this in the past? What's worked, what hasn't worked? This is also an area where you can start to identify the red flags. If they're like, oh man, my last agency was horrible, red flag, right? So it's like, maybe they just don't know how to work with agencies, maybe it was a bad agency. But start to listen to that. And you can also get a sense of what they value, what are the trends that they're seeing. And then, this is the one that no one wants to ask, but it's a really good qualifying question. Are there any hard boundaries? What's the budget? timing, platforms, I'll often say, listen, let's back out. Give me a goal and give me a budget. And I can start to put a plan together around those. And then I can start to see, am I a right fit? Are we talking about champagne on a beer budget? Or are we talking about something that's more aligned with what we need to be able to do? And so, again, it's these 4 questions. I can send this out afterwards, and then you can start to build questions around this. It doesn't matter if it's just a straight design project or if it's, a full migration. You can start to build those initial listening questions. And what's great is by the time you jump on that call, they're going to be like, gosh, I'm not exactly sure what they do, but they really get me. And it's like, we didn't have to talk. We just had to go and listen. And so again, starting by listening. The next part is, okay, we've listened. Now let's show up with a plan. Oftentimes, the thing that I think people fall into a mistake on is they will go through and try to create the final answer. You know it. You can see their problem. You're like, man, we just need to go in and go in and create that final answer. Instead, take a moment and look at how we can plan to build that answer together. And the thing with building an answer together is you're actually sort of humbling yourself to say, I'm not going to just jump in this. I'm not going to try to railroad you into a solution. Instead, I'm going to work beside you, and I am going to help to guide this process so that we get to the answer. And let's go through and start to look at how we plan. Our project plans are really complicated. We do like a lot of this like Gantt charts and all that. You don't have to do this, right? You're really scaling up. You've got, Uros or whoever. You guys have some complicated project plans. But you can start with just something simple. What are the activities? What's the effort per those activities? How do we total up those total hours? And then how do we think about the hours per that role? So, sometimes we'll start in FigJam. Just get sort of a set of Post-it notes, get those out. And then this is actually, when we were starting 12 years ago, this is the project planning template that I used. It's in numbers, Apple numbers. That'll give you a clue of I had no idea how to be able to plan a project, but I had seen these sort of Gantt chart things before. And along the left-hand side, if we start to break this down, I have those activities. What is it that we're going to do? And then coming across the right, then I start to apply hours. So how many hours per day? And then I just total that up. What's my total duration? And then I start to assign that per roles. So small teams, maybe a designer, UX developer, whatever. But then that starts to give me this framework so that I can bring that back to the customer, and I'll have a holistic plan of what we're going to do, as well as I just total those hours up, multiply them by a rate, and I've got our budget. Now, this next part, I want to be able to sort of shift gears a little bit. We've talked about how to listen, how to be able to create a plan, and now let's talk about making it personal and helping to define a choice. So making it personal is just, again, this is the biggest hack. When we jump on that call, we're not going to make this response about us. We're going to totally make this response about the customer that we're going to be working with. And we're going to frame it 100% around the discovery questions. If they send an RFP, I actually structure our responses around the RFP and make sure that whenever we're tuning our language, it is within their world. Also, think about this. If you're pitching a piece of work, chances are someone on the other side, they either have an actual checklist that they're evaluating the different responses by, or they have a mental checklist. So think about that mental checklist in the back of your head. The other thing I would say is, this is sort of controversial, but I never send over looms. Use that meeting as a way to connect and make sure that you're building that relationship. The loom is a way, if you've got to send out a ton of them, I get it, but really when you start to get into scaling up that business, you want to use every single moment. Also, never leave a meeting without setting your next meeting. So when I'm finishing that first discovery call, I'll be like, great, how does next Wednesday work for you? And I'll make sure to set that meeting. And then when I'm closing off on this meeting, I'll say, great, when should we reconnect to see how this is working internally for your team? So again, if we think about this, we want our client to be the hero and us as the agency to be the guide. We don't want to make our business response about how awesome we are. We want to make our business response about how awesome the client is going to be. And so when we start thinking about this reframing, this is the biggest hack, which is just take these 4 questions and then write out what is going to be our assignment. And I will first start the meeting reading, basically sort of repitching back the assignment. And all I'm doing is I'm saying, I've heard you. Here is what you've been able to frame for me. And here's the way that we're going to talk about this today. And then the last question is, what did I leave out? I love to ask this question because this goes and says to them, I want to know everything. If there is something that I didn't capture within our call or something that's changed since we've talked last, that I want to capture that right now. That gives them a chance to talk, and then if they say, you haven't left out anything, I'll say, great. I haven't left out anything. Also mirroring. There's a ton of other things you can do, but then you can keep going and say, let's move on to the rest of the plan. Last thing here around showing case studies, I'll try to make sure that I've at least included something in every single case study around why we've chosen that particular piece of work to be able to show it to them. So it could be like, I've learned this. Also, it's not about necessarily the results that we've produced. It's what did we learn and how does that apply to your business? And so creating it in terms of that, I learned this from this project and I'm applying it to this within your project is a great way to be able to talk about those case studies and examples. Finally, around creating a choice. And this is the last one. And then, again, feeling actually a little better. So I'm just going to go ahead and cheers everyone again. Let's talk about creating a choice. So one of the last mistakes that people make is they sort of go through that, they show the budget, and they're like, oh, awesome, I'll see you later. And they haven't necessarily defined, sort of wrapped it up. And I think Julian, I can't remember who, they were talking about hey, when you're making a presentation, it's like, what are you going to say? You say the thing and you wrap the thing up. And so don't end with a thank you slide. I know that sounds sort of weird, but it's like you want to lead with what you're going to do next. So again, frame the conversation around why we're the right fit, what we've been able to do. And this is kind of the shorthand of what that formula looked like. You asked for this assignment. We've shown you these examples. We've given you a plan and a budget. And now we're kind of going and putting that into one bow that you can then take to your boss. Because chances are, if you're pitching a piece of work, the person you're pitching it to, they have multiple people that they need to be able to summarize this for. So this is really their slide so that they can understand what you just presented and be able to take that back into their internal stakeholders. Thank you. I'm kidding. I just did the thing I told you I wasn't going to do, which is leave on a thank you slide. And I'm sorry, I just had to do that. But really, again, selling is helping. It is about how we listen, create a plan, make it personal, and create a choice. And the next steps here is that, again, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'm not up here today to say that I have all the answers. What I'm really trying to say is that it's okay to talk about new business, to be able to talk about how we share ideas, what we're learning. A lot of times, as designers and developers, we're really quick to share, here's the thing I built, but not always around how did we land that piece of work. I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation over the next few days and thinking about how we can grow businesses together. And so the files can be downloaded at, I have no idea where, but that will be sent out after this talk. But really, Shaba.